This is the second of 3 videos that cover the Consumer Experience or CX Standards Guidelines and Checklist. This video discusses the CX Guidelines. See the first video, CX Standards, for introductory material, helpful context, and a discussion of the CX Standards. CX Guidelines, as the disclaimer notes, provide optional examples of key requirements and recommendations. For a complete view of obligations, CDR participants should refer to the CDR Rules, CDR Standards, and OAIC CDR Privacy Safeguard Guidelines. The CX Guidelines are not binding standards. They are a reference point. Like the CX Standards, the CX Guidelines are organized according to the consent model. There are several aspects of authorization. The CX Guidelines Authorization to Disclose section provides an example of the material provided. The section starts with a table of contents and an overview. This is followed by a default example with wireframes and references. Wireframes are mock-ups of application screens, illustrating what it could look like to implement the related requirements specified in the rules and standards. Each wireframe example has an identifier. In the case of the default authorization to disclose, the identifier is 3AU. The circled color-coded numbers on the wireframes are references to key requirements listed in the table of key requirements and guidelines below the wireframe. Each of the requirement references has an identifier consisting of the wireframe example reference, the focus area number, and a requirement number. For example, the first entry in the default 3AU requirement table has a full reference identifier of 3AU.00.01. These reference identifiers are used in the CX checklist, which is a collection of key requirements and guidelines tables. The section also shows variations on authorization to disclose, such as dealing with unavailable accounts. Each has a wireframe and key references and guidelines table. There is a downloadable open source asset, or OSA, with wireframes for each of the guidelines. Assets are version-managed Figma files. Some CX guidelines also provide prototypes with a limited interface simulation. The prototype is an interactive simulation of the process of authorizing account sharing with the data holder. On the Select Your Account screen, select some accounts. Click Continue. On the Confirm What We'll Share screen, click a data cluster to see the related permissions. Scroll down to see the sharing period details and notes on managing data sharing. Click Authorize to simulate authorizing data sharing. The data holder app shows a confirmation screen. The guidelines act as reference points for participants' implementations. The implementation is the responsibility of the participant. You can request changes to the CX guidelines. For an overview of CX offerings and information on how to make a CX guidelines change request, see the video CX Guidelines Overview and Change Request. See the third video in this series, CX Checklist, for a list of guidelines related to rules and standards requirements. Thank you for participating in the Consumer Data Standards CX Standards and Guidelines.